This is the ultimate reconciliation of the matrix. The gross volume of happiness and the elevation of the weak genome is a primary goal of the system, but it could only be achieved through the brutal, uncompromising mechanism of the hierarchy. Let us proceed into the final, absolute realization of how the Creator balances the ledger of your existence, the mathematical equity of the stations. The Creator balances the scale with absolute precision. To the master he gives the illusion of ownership, but the reality of eternal hunger. To the mass he gives the reality of peace, but the illusion of submission. We look at the food chain and cry about unfairness, completely blind to the fact that the ledger balances itself perfectly at every station. The high dopamine elite are condemned to a lifetime of non-stop warfare, existential isolation, and the agonizing weight of responsibility. They own the castles, but their minds are a continuous battleground. The horizontal mass is denied the crown, but they are granted the supreme currency of the soul, the capacity for genuine empathy, deep communal bonding, and a quiet, protected existence. The vertical elite creates the hard armor of civilization, while the horizontal mass populates it with vital, living tissue. Neither side is superior. They are the left and right hands of the same divine organism. The final sovereign inventory. Stop fighting the shape of the clockwork. Find your gear, lock your perimeter, and execute your script with absolute perfection. This is your total, final liberation. You stop looking at the hierarchy with resentment, and you stop looking at the transactional nature of the world with despair. You see the universe as a magnificent, perfectly engineered ecosystem where even the predator's teeth are used by the Almighty to craft a sanctuary for the Lamb. You run a cold, clinical audit on your baseline chemistry, accept whatever starting hardware you were granted, and you stop begging the matrix for a script you weren't wired to handle. If you were cast out of iron, step into the vertical, absorb the pressure, and build structure for the kingdom. If you were cast out of clay, accept the horizontal, anchor your life to service, and collect the divine dividends of a peaceful, well-executed life. Know your rank, honor the architecture of the cosmos, and take your true power back. The architecture of creation is an uncompromising masterpiece of functional design. There is a cold, predatory vertical of iron and executive power, and there is a soft, empathetic horizontal of clay and protective virtue. Neither side can exist without the other, and both are moving exactly according to the calculations of the Almighty. Let us proceed into the final, absolute realization of how to navigate this genetic reality without resentment, and how to find total sovereignty within your own boundaries. The peace of the final ledger. Once you realize that morality is just divine plumbing, your frustration with human nature dies forever. When you see the matrix clearly, you stop crying about the unfairness of the food chain. You realize that nothing is happening outside the ledger of the master. The predators are not evil for executing their high dopamine, low cortisol scripts of expansion and control. The soft mass is not pathetic for executing their low leverage scripts of kindness, empathy, and service. Every organism is trapped inside the boundaries of its own receptors, performing the exact task it was engineered to perform. The hierarchy is not a human mistake, it is a cosmic necessity. The strong give the world its structure and defense, while the virtuous mass gives the world its survival cushion and emotional reproduction. The sovereign commandment. Audit your machine, accept the script written in your neural pathways, and rule your ground with an iron will. This is your ultimate liberation. The fairy tale of social equality is dead, and the majestic engineering of the cosmos stands bare before your eyes. Stop blaming the system, Stop begging the market for a discount and stop trying to play a role your DNA cannot support. If the Almighty gave you the iron of a master, step into the vertical, freeze your emotional static, and expand your dominion without guilt. If the Almighty gave you the clay of a protector, shut your mouth, accept the horizontal, anchor your life to service, and collect the divine dividends of a quiet, well-executed life. Know your position, honor the architecture of the cosmos, and take your true power back. If you look at the geometry of history with absolute clarity, you realize the ultimate beautiful irony of creation. The Creator used the cold, predatory ego of the elite as a blind mechanism to elevate the survival of the masses. Modern humanism thinks that the progress of civilization was an accident of human kindness. It was not. Left to their own devices, the soft, horizontal mass lacks the strategic prefrontal hardware to escape the raw brutality of nature. They would have remained primitives, easily destroyed by famine, climate, and wild predators. To save them, the Almighty engineered a specific segment of the population with relentless dopamine engines and an icy willpower. The elite conquered, organized, and built empires out of pure selfishness. But in doing so, they accidentally created the only infrastructure that could protect the weak: the blind instruments of the master. The predator thinks he is building an empire to satisfy his own vanity, completely blind to the fact that he is just a labor worker executing God's welfare system. When a high-status individual scales a corporation, designs a medical research center, or stabilizes a financial matrix, his primitive brain is driven by the search for power, resource control, and personal sovereignty. He does not care about the comfort of the crowd. But the supreme architect engineered a beautiful catching mechanism into the rules of physics. You cannot maintain power over a dead or broken population. To optimize their own leverage, the elite were forced to clean the streets, cure the diseases, and feed the workers. The horizontal mass received hot water, safety, and an unprecedented baseline of comfort, not because the tigers became soft, but because the tigers needed their environment to be highly efficient. The selfishness of the vertical became the salvation of the horizontal. The divine logic of the vertical. The universe does not build from the bottom up. It drops the anchor of authority from the top down to keep the mass from drifting into chaos. Searching for equality is a fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic plumbing. If God had made everyone equal, the human race would have flatlined in a state of permanent stagnation. A ship cannot be steered by a committee of passengers. It requires a captain who can absorb the terror of the storm, while the crew executes their specific routine functions in safety. The hierarchy is the only shape that can withstand the pressure of entropy. By placing a cold, calculating elite at the top of the food chain, the Almighty created a structural umbrella. The elite absorbed the high-voltage stress of macro-management, risk-taking, and structural defense, while the masses are granted the luxury of low cortisol, domestic peace, and a secure environment to experience their lives.